As Vice President of Harris Interactive, Peter Shafer knows how to ask a question, or 2 or 3,000, which is exactly why we relied on him to conduct the very eye-opening Sandbox Summit toy survey called Cracking the Code. Please welcome Peter Shafer.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Wendy. Before I begin, there are a few people that I want to recognize who helped with the study, not only in its conception, but also in its execution. Dr. Suzanne Martin, who is here in the crowd, Denny Soto, and 2 people from my staff, Linda Crane and Andrea Peters. For us, this is a labor of love, and as a father of 4 kids, I get to use a lot of this data directly in my day-to-day interaction with my 4 kids, and sometimes the anecdotal data that I find out is sometimes more compelling than the actual data that we get back from kids. Copies of the presentation are going to be available to you outside after this presentation, but what I want to do is start with the destination first and then go back and cover the journey. And I want to start with the 12 takeaways that are important for you guys to remember no matter what part of the child industry or what part of the child marketplace you're in. And we'll save time for questions at the end, but I'm going to run through these 12 quickly, and then I'm going to show you the data that backs them up. First is that boys and girls dramatically differ when it comes to the value that they gain from a particular play experience. And not that that's any big surprise, but what is surprising is that boys tend to really like the challenge and winning much more than girls do. And girls like the pretending and offering different roles and different alternatives for toys, which is consistent across age groups. The second, and this is a little bit counterintuitive to what you hear, is that if you want to be successful with toys, the first thing is make it fun. The second is make it easy to use. Third is make it easy to interact with, that there's not a lot of setup, and to make it easy to play with. Kids nowadays are very, very sophisticated in their ability to manipulate certain both technological and non-technological toys. And I think sometimes that we over-finesse things, and it came through in the data that they just want it to be easy and they want it to be fun. And that's going to be the common theme throughout this, is that fun, and let's not underestimate the amount of fun, but fun is the driving factor in toy consumption and certainly toy use. Number 3 is that kids see the value of learning through toys, but it is not their objective when they start playing with toys. There's been a lot of focus on learning toys and parents, getting toys from various companies. Learning is an outcome, and the kids see it as an outcome. They expect it, they understand it, but it's not why they go into playing with toys. Number 4, and again following up, is that the outcome of play really needs to be more of a selling point than it is. Right now, I think there's a shift in both the advertising and marketing around some of the tangible benefits around learning and things like that. It really comes down to fun and entertainment for the kids. And is the game challenging? And do they get the stimulation from the challenge that they want? Number 5, as they age, and this is no big surprise, kids rely less on toys as a conduit for fun, and it actually shifts over and becomes more of an inspirational type activity for them, and it's inspirational and aspirational. They begin to look at the toy as a way to express themselves, a way to communicate to their families and to their friends, and more importantly, they begin to look at their creativity through their eyes as the way they interact with toys. Number 6, delivering a variety of experiences within one toy or one particular product tends to be a theme both among boys and girls. Obviously, video games and all the different scenarios that come through in video games is one example of that. But I think more importantly is that for kids, they look at the toy not in a monolithic way, but more in a very holistic way. And the more experiences and the more roles that they can derive from either pretending or the creativity or the challenge of that, the more likely they are to be engaged with the toy, but also listed as their favorite toy. Number 8, we need to pay more attention to the growing diversity of youth and the increasing role of extended family members within that picture. One of the statistics you'll see later on in this is that 70% of kids list their favorite game as being a gift from a family member, which is absolutely it just blew that answer right off the charts. But again, in terms of their relationship, in terms of with the toy and also with their family, there is a direct correlation between how much they value the toy and how much they value it in terms of the gift from the family. Number 9, kids' favorite toys tend to be those that allow them to utilize their creativity and imagination. I know it's a common theme. You hear it quite often. The interesting part is as kids age and grow, that creativity and imagination shift, and it's a different type of need that's being met in terms of how creative they are and what their imagination levels are. Number 10, and this was kind of a surprise to us, we actually looked at the data and then compared it with some other data that we had done for another client, and creativity seems to be an indicator for career choice, especially around choice of toys. So kids that tend to name themselves or self-identify themselves as being more creative tend to migrate to careers that allow them to express that, either in technology formats or technology careers or other types of markets. But it was very interesting to see that there was a linkage between how creative the kids thought they were, what toys that they used, and then what career paths they had begun to discuss for themselves. And finally, that kids are very, very, very aware of brand names. They're very aware of the new products that are coming out on the market. And one of the things that we're exploring, even we're going back into the field, or we've actually just gotten back out of the field of this, is how much the personal brand of the child or the kid links with your corporate brand, and how much identity they derive from that brand. We just released some data that we worked on with 2,000 kids for the 25th anniversary of cell phones. Besides clothing, this little device, well, I actually I put it away because I thought I put my toy away. That cell phones are the second highest indicator of personal brand of anything else. It's not watches, it's not jewelry, it's clothing and cell phones. So anyway, I'm going to put a couple disclaimers up here, at least, I shouldn't say disclaimers, at least summaries of the research. We talked to 1,353 kids aged 8 to 18 back in July. We did this online. We have a youth panel at Harris Interactive. Youth Center of Excellence has its own youth panel, which is constantly updated. We get about 12,000 hits per month, or 12,000 new members per month, and we do research all the time with kids in this framework. We've weighted it so that it is representative of the population. For the media people, and this will be in the presentation that you guys get outside, this is the actual disclaimer when you go back to your editors and they say, no, we can't print online data. This is why you can. So we could spend hours on that topic alone. Here's basically the outline from the points that I gave you. A couple of specific things that we want to cover, particularly the first part, beyond fun and what makes toys fun and what kids are looking for. When we asked we divided the sample into two groups, the tweens and the teens, 8 to 12 being the tweens, 13 to 17 or 13 to 18 being the teens. And we asked this very simple question: how important are each of the following when thinking about toys that you would play with? We're going to start broadly with toys first, and then we're going to drive down into specific favorite toys in a few minutes. But you can see on the list here, fun, makes me use my imagination, challenging, no big surprise. Interesting, though, in terms of the ease of use, if you can, just for a second on the gender side of this, girls are much more likely to say that they want a toy that's easy to use than boys are. There's some, we didn't really dig too deep into what categories of toys they mean, but it was kind of an interesting finding for us, because we see that girls tend to be more emotionally developed than boys and tend to get through hurdles quicker than boys in some cases, and this kind of indicates that they want more ease of use. What was surprising to us really was at the bottom here that it teaches me something. And again, the fun, the entertainment value, the challenge is on the top, and the learning part is at the bottom. And when we kind of quizzed the kids a little bit deeper about this, it really came out as, well, you know what, that just happens as part of the process. It's not necessarily an intended consequence or an intended benefit, but it just happens. And I think the kids recognize that. We asked the same question, obviously, the 13 to 18. Similar kinds of breakouts, as you can see. And again, down and below, that teaches me something is the lowest. These are specific statements that we did ask the kids to rate within the study. We need toys to have fun. You can see that as kids get older, there's less reliance on maybe the definition of a toy. And two things that really I want to make clear about this. In the research, we didn't lead the kids to define what a toy was. We didn't ask them to define what play was. We kind of let them self-define it. And obviously, there's a whole range of toys that you'll see in a minute that make this kind of a fragmented approach, I guess, or a fragmented result. But the fact that 8 to 12-year-olds really, 6 and 10, say that toys are really important for them and that we need toys to have fun is an indicator that fun factor is really, really important to the kids. And I don't think we kind of always assume that there's fun as part of this, but I think that, again, the imperative is it fun first? Does it challenge me? And then third, is there something that I can do with this that gives me some variety and allows me to place in different roles? I think those are the kind of the three litmus tests that we have that have come out of this. The most important part of a toy is that it's entertaining. You can see, again, 8 to 12-year-olds, very, very high scores on this. Even, for the kids 13 to 18, it's pretty high. And again, the entertainment value, I think, is, we haven't really made some hard and fast definitions around what entertainment is, whether it's something that is in video format or whether it's a digital game or whatever. But again, I think that the key theme here is that kids want to be captivated. They want to have that experience that they can then go share with others, and part of that is entertainment. Again, the thought-provoking aspect you can see. Kids do enjoy things that make them think, and not surprising. If you look at the bottom score, I think it's a little bit even. The starker difference is that I would rather have a toy or game that is fun to play, even if it didn't help me learn. Again, that learning theme coming back. But you look at how kids migrate from 8 to 12, and as they get older, toys begin to take on a different experience, and they do want to learn, and that there is some learning component to that. Here's a statistic that kind of jumped out at us that is not really overly surprising, but I think the intensity of which it was, and especially when you look at the difference between the genders, that toys that involve technology, video games, computer games, handheld things, tend to be more fun than other toys, and certainly you can see boys 8 to 12 think that that's definitely, and as I have two sons, 13 and 10, and I can even see the differences in how they interact now with games. But still, very, very high percentages for boys in both categories, a little less for girls. We did a study about a year ago that on average said that boys aged 8 to 18 spent 16 hours per week playing video games and girls playing 9. They just happen to play in different formats, and they just happen to play with different types on different platforms. But the fact that boys are spending twice as much time on games as girls is certainly significant. But the fact that girls are spending 9 hours on video games is pretty significant as well. And you'll see that when they name their favorite toys in a few minutes. Portability of entertainment and portability of the technology. This doesn't, for parents, this actually shouldn't surprise anybody, and for people who travel with kids, this really shouldn't surprise anybody. I've actually called NASCAR to see if they could put kids in cars and have them in the back seat. When are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? I think that would be a truer test of driving. But one of the things that I hear from parents more often than not is that ever since they added DVD players to minivans and some other things, is that there's less of that interaction in the car. But obviously, they want the portability. They want to be able to take it with them. And I think that's one of the important parts of why some of the technology toys have been so successful, is that the kids are able to transport them easily. They're able to communicate with others more easily, but they don't have to interrupt because of the day-to-day life. We're going to shift gears for a second. That's just generally about the toys, and we're going to speak now about kids' favorite toys, and when we ask them what their favorite toy is, this is about the one toy that they said was their favorite. Again, how well does define your favorite toy. Fun, challenging. Again, for boys, you can see 77% said that they want the challenge out of it, where girls it's only 51%. Both still significant numbers, but again, I think in terms of not only the marketing but also positioning and things like that, is that challenge for boys is particularly important. And I know that you guys know this very well. The market is beginning to segment even more and more and more. I was out in California yesterday with Disney talking about their new one of their new launches next year, and their targeted demographic is boys age 6 to 11. It's their new Disney XD, and it's incredible that how narrowly the segments are beginning to define themselves. And so when you're looking at this, even for 8 to 12. It's going to look a little bit different in just a second when you see the 13 to 15, or I'm sorry, the 13 to 18. But again, fun, challenging, easy to use. Yes. Sure. DVD players, no. iPods, yes, were mentioned. But it was more in the traditional sense, and we're going to get to that in a second, because we actually we asked two questions. One was open-ended, asked them what their favorite toy was, and then we actually gave them a list and then asked them some questions around that. So we'll get to that in just a second. But again, we wanted this to be as broad as possible to kind of capture what some of the new definitions of toys are, but it's a good question to. Again, for teens, you can see the switches around again. The one big switch here, though, is that challenging drops down to number 5 on the list. Fun still remains number 1. Ease of use is number 2. And while kids, I think, at that age want some challenge, I think that they've migrated to a different level of activity or interactivity with their toys. And I think among boys in particular, when you see the challenging part here, there's still that competition where they can go in and say, well, I scored this, or I did this, or what the result of their online activity was. This is when you ask them specifically about their favorite toy. This was it jumped out at me for 2 reasons. Number one is that obviously boys want the challenge and they play to win. No big surprise there, but I think when you look at the gender differences on this, and especially with some of the toy categories that we're going to get to in a few minutes, it is a little bit surprising how intense those scores are compared to some other categories. With girls, certainly the ability to play in different ways, the role playing that's involved with certain toys, and the way that they can pretend and be creative and create different scenarios for themselves is really a very interesting data point here, but it's also a very interesting opportunity for toy manufacturers and certainly toy marketers, because I think that the ability to position the product as an outlet for their creativity and as an outlet for the way they describe their roles and their expanding roles is important to girls. It's less important to boys, but it does provide some really interesting opportunities, I think, to reach out to that audience in a very different way. One thing that we really didn't mention too much about, but was a little bit of a surprise to us, is how solitary play has become for kids. I'm not sure how to describe this, but I think the assumption and concept of play was it's a group of kids outside and they're running around and and it's kind of more organic and very kind of communal. And right now, it's really looking like it's more of a solitary event. And I'm not sure the implications of that in terms of how kids make the decision, or what they whether they decide to play with friends or their brothers or sisters or whomever. But the fact that they're playing games more alone and actually seek that opportunity out, I think it offers a lot of opportunity for more exploration. Yes. Yeah. Do we make? Yeah. The question was whether we made any distinction between social device, the interaction with social. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, whether you're playing with a toy or whether you're just hanging out with friends. We actually didn't make the distinction, but the kids have made it for us. And you'll see in a couple slides here that they actually do look at it more as an opportunity to play alone. Next is, I think, I think it's playing with friends, and then siblings is third. And even playing with grandparents and parents is a little bit higher than what we expected. But I will tell you that this is consistent with a study that we did with the NCAA football about 18 months ago when we were looking at fan interaction with college football. And we did it among kids, and interestingly enough, even among adults, that watching college football became a solitary event versus a group event. And I think that NCAA football was a little shocked at how many kids really were watching alone or just watching with their family, because they expected them to go out and have the experience, to actually be involved or go to a game or go to a different location to watch a game. But in actuality, there's a lot of alone time with this. Now, I mean, I think you guys are you've seen the market evolve. A lot of the toys are designed for both solitary and group play. So it's not unlikely that you're playing in a group and whether it's on a PlayStation game or a Wii or something along those lines, then go home and actually play individually on that same game. And this slide, this really kind of jumped out at us, was the pretending side and the role-playing side that the girls actually put more emphasis on this. And you look at this age range, the 13 to 18, really, really stark numbers here in terms of the way that they really pretend with the toys. And I think that one of the significant parts of this is that they are developing and sorting out the different ways that they interact with toys at this level. And I think one of the things, or one of the key parts of this, is that role-playing allows them to express themselves in a way that they might not otherwise be able to in certain settings. We're actually doing some work right now on how kids interact with virtual worlds and what they do and what the graduation patterns are. So what happens when you outgrow Webkins? Where do you go next? And what happens when you go? And I heard, I was kind of shocked. I guess there are 80 sites now for kids, and that by the end of 2010, there are going to be 150 virtual reality sites just specifically designed for kids. But there's no graduation pattern. There's no natural progression out of that. And I think that this idea of pretending kind of feeds into where are these outlets going to be. And I think that girls more than boys see their favorite toy as the outlet for that pretending.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Could you define kids there, what age group in those virtual worlds? Are you talking 8 to 12 or 13 to 18? Or
Actually, we're looking at it all the way across, from 8 to 18. We actually, it's a concept that we're beginning to try to get some traction around. We know that the incidence of kids actually participating in virtual worlds, if you look at the whole population, is relatively low. And when you ask for Webkins or Club Penguin or some of the other groups or some of the other virtual websites, but what we found was that there was no connection between where kids go. And as you can see, I mean, the needs of an 8-year-old are different than the needs of a 13-year-old or even the 16-year-old that enter into these worlds. And I think the thing that struck us was that there's kind of this, there's no tiering or there's no migration pattern to it. It's just kind of all scattered. And I think that kids are, with their level of sophistication right now, they're exploring a lot of different things, but there's nothing that's really necessarily sticking, or that they can say that I'm going to stay here for this amount of time. It probably doesn't answer your question, but did I answer your question? Okay. Again, the kids put a lot of emphasis on the fun part of this, cool part, the variety of ways to play. Pretend to role play, the creativity and building part of this. But you can see, again, really, really strong themes about the fun, the various ways you can play with a particular game, and then the role playing that they get from out of it. Again, kids understand that learning is a byproduct of playing with toys. It is not always the goal of this. And you can see that 64% of the 8 to 12-year-olds said they do learn something from toys. 50% of teens say they do learn something from toys. I think the not sure part really comes from the fact that they are so familiar with their favorite toy that they're, it's now kind of ingrained that the learning is almost innate, I guess, for lack of a better term. But I think that we see certainly the pattern or the understanding that learning is there. Again, we talked about this, that it's playing with their favorite toy is usually a solitary event. And as you can see, both boys and girls, over 75% say that they usually play with their favorite toy by themselves. Second was with a friend. Third with their brother and sister, and then with the parents. One of the things that jumped out at us, it was at that bottom. Right now, 1 in 10 kids have a grandparent, at least one grandparent living in the household. And that from that standpoint, it doesn't necessarily surprise us that they're playing with their grandparents. What does surprise us is that boys are playing with their grandparents more than girls are. And I don't have any explanation for that. This is going to be in the handout. I'm going to skip over this just in terms of time. But again, why toys are their favorite. I can play by myself with some friends, and we'll flip through this. This was I'd mentioned this earlier in the presentation, and for marketing purposes, and certainly for the Christmas season coming up, and we'll have our statistics on the Christmas season coming out in about 2 weeks. The fact that kids value and really hold dear the fact that their favorite toy is a gift from one of their family members, is a pretty significant finding, especially when you look at what else is on that list. It really is important, let's put it this way. Never underestimate the power of what that gift is, or the influence that child has either on a parent or grandparent or family member on what those gifts are. And because we're seeing that the kids certainly have more influence on purchasing decisions, they have more money, but ultimately they value something that is given to them more than something that they actually go out and get themselves, as you can see where that. Here are just an assortment of the brands that came out, and this was in an open-ended format where we asked them what their favorite toys were. Again, I will tell you a couple things out of this. We started out with let's let them name their own toy, and then I'll show you some data where we actually forced a choice. But these are the brand names that they mentioned, just top of mind. The good news is that kids are very brand aware. The bad news is that kids are very brand aware. What was kind of stunning out of this was that, that the industry is very, very, very fragmented, certainly. But that when you look at certain brands on this list, that it's more about the platform than it is about the individual parts of the platform. And I'll use this example in a second because you'll see this. If you look and you ask their favorite toy, kids 2/3 of the time will mention the brand and versus a non-branded toy. When you look at this, the younger kids, 8 to 12, are more likely to name the brand than the older kids are. So 8 to 12s, they're sponges for the brand stuff. The kids, the teens, the 65% there, again, they are beginning to now form at that age a concept of what their personal brand is, and your brand becomes part of their personal brand. And when that's used up, your brand goes and another brand substitutes in. We see this with cell phone usage. We see this in clothing usage or clothing purchasing. Again, I can't overemphasize this, that the big transformation here is that kids understand how to develop their own personal brand, and your brand becomes an extension of their brand, not vice versa. And you can see Midwestern kids were more likely to mention brand products by name. And again, there's really not that much difference regionally, which is good news. Here are the top brands in what we call unaided. So again, Legos, Barbies, Nintendo, PlayStation. One of the things that jumped out at us on this in particular was that obviously Legos has a number of different product extensions, Bionicles and some others, but it really came back to Legos. Barbie, same kind of thing. Nintendo DS has hundreds of games. PlayStation has hundreds of games. Game Boy has, but it comes back to the platform. It's not necessarily about the game. But you can see the rest of this list. Again, the thing to take out of this, because this is open-ended in it, because it is unaided awareness, this is something that is, that's why the percentages are so low. You can see the breakout between males and females, and because I have 5 minutes, I'm going to run through this a little bit quick. But those other categories, that's the accumulation of toys that did not have enough mentions to make it into the top of the list. So, for example, iPods would be on there. Kids may have named that as a toy. So, but again, you see the range here. I think one of the significant things on this is if you look at both boys and girls, the appearance of video games within that mix, it's a little different, but again, some of the major platforms are certainly mentioned. On the left-hand side of this is the graph I showed you about 2 slides ago. On the right-hand side, for those kids who definitely named a brand by name, we asked them, what do did that toy, your favorite toy, or did that brand teach you something? And you can see on the on the right-hand side of this, those lists of brands that kids say, and meaning top 2 box, meaning the people that said 5 and the people said 4, that they actually learned something from this toy. So you can see the PlayStation, Rubik's Cube, Legos, and it's again, the good news is that kids are learning from this, so it's not necessarily an intended outcome, but it is definitely good to see that some of these games are teaching the kids. Let me quickly go through this. Here's a list of the favorite toy by the type, and this is when we asked them to think about their favorite toy. This is what came up. And again, very dispersed, but video game stations, dolls, building toys, handheld games. If you can look down at the bottom, there are a couple things that kind of jumped out at us that were a little bit interesting. Number one was electronic learning toys. Again, back to this theme of fun versus learning. And the video games themselves, the cartridges themselves, scored lower than the actual device or the platform. So I think that they look at that as interchangeable. There is a typo on this slide. The second one should be building toys versus creativity in building. But the significance here is this. When we asked kids to name their favorite toy, there were 904 of them that said they could name it. When we went back to those kids and said, okay, of your favorite toys, what is it? 100% of them could name the brand on an online video game. They could name the handheld device. They could name the electronic toy by brand. So they're very, very, very brand aware, and they understand and know what those brands are. But again, you'll be able to get the breakout of this upstairs. The creativity part of this cannot be underemphasized. Again, fun and cool, that's terrific. But the role playing, the creativity, the imagination, those are very, very key elements for both boys and girls, but more specifically to girls. But you can see that these, if you subtracted fun out, these are the top attributes. And you can see that, again, creativity, imagination right at the top. Again, here's some in their own words and by particular brand, but I'm going to fast forward right to the... if you look at the top 10 categories by gender, we asked kids, did they think they were creative or not creative? And for the kids who really thought that they were extremely creative, those are the top 10. For the kids who didn't think they were as creative, you can see the top 10. Interesting that the list is, is kind of, there's a lot of similarity between the two lists. One thing on the extremely creative and creative part is puzzles pops up, whereas on the other one it doesn't. And certainly that's where Rubik's Cube comes in and some other puzzle games that they play with. We asked this question, do you think, how creative are you? And in 8 to 12, in the tween category, girls tended to say that they were more creative. But if you look, and I'll show you in a slide in a second as the migration out of this, it's a great distribution. It's a really, really nice distribution of this. But you've got over 60, almost 60% of girls saying they're creative, about 50% of boys saying they're creative or very creative, which is great news. But then it drops. And I have no explanation for it, but it's very interesting that all of a sudden, you graduate into this 13 to 18, and you're no longer creative anymore. So, but again, it's still a pretty good distribution of this. The key finding out of the creativity is, again, what we linked before, is that kids who said that they were extremely creative or creative said that yes, 1/3 of the time they were going to go after tech and engineering jobs. That they use the technology of toys to really get, it's helping them define and decide what kinds of careers they want to go into. And you can see the difference is about 11 points between it. But look at the spread on gender, males versus females. It's 3 to 1 in both cases. And that so boys are definitely using their toy play as an extension of possibly what they want to be when they grow up. Of course, assuming that they ever really do want to grow up. So here are the 12 points that I started with. It's been a kind of a really quick and fast journey to get to these points. But again, these are available when up at the front desk. But fun. Let's not underestimate that. The level of creativity and imagination that goes into play, and how they look at their toys as an extension of themselves is certainly important. But I think for the future of what toys are, and how you build toys that are challenging and fun and exciting, it's really kids want to engage with these types of toys. They are seeking these opportunities out. So the more that you can do to make it easy for them to use, make it easy for them to access, and certainly make it easy for them to to manipulate, the better likelihood you're going to have in terms of the success. I know are we done? Okay. So, wow, that was a lot of talking in a little bit of time. So thank you guys very, very much.